Why would a colonel stop to check a supply worker's clipboard? Why would his hand tremble at a simple inventory sheet? Jordan Pike kept her eyes down, her fingers moving over ammunition magazines with mechanical rhythm. The metallic clink of steel on steel was almost comforting. It drowned out everything else, the chatter of other contractors, the distant sound of forklifts, the ever-present hum of fluorescent lights in the depot. Counting, recording, stacking. Numbers never asked her questions. They never looked at her too closely. From a distance, she was invisible. A quiet worker in a gray contractor's uniform, hair tied back, boots scuffed from use. The kind of person who faded into the background of a military base. But her grip on the clipboard betrayed something more firm, steady, like it wasn't paper she held, but a weapon. Colonel noticed. He had only approached because of a minor discrepancy in an officer's requisition report, the sort of thing that passed through supply with hardly a second glance. But when he reached for her clipboard and scanned the page, his gaze snagged on a single, faded stamp at the top. A name. A ghost. Blue Phantom. His breath caught. The clipboard nearly slipped from his hand. Jordan didn't flinch. She just waited, expression unreadable, as though this were a normal moment in an ordinary day. But inside, her pulse quickened, the way it once had when wind shifted through the barrel of her rifle, and she knew she had seconds to adjust for a shot no one else could make. His eyes darted from the page to her face. He had heard the rumors. Whispers passed in sealed briefing rooms about the sniper who had pulled off the impossible. Over 200 confirmed kills, many at ranges so far they shouldn't have been possible with existing equipment. Blue Phantom, the name circulated in stories told with half belief, half awe. And then one day, silence. Reports said she had died, presumed lost in a mission that had gone catastrophically wrong. No body recovered. No closure. And yet here she stood. Studied her looking for cracks. Nothing. Her stance was too precise. Shoulders relaxed but never slouched. Breathing steady. A presence like water held in a glass, still, contained, but always ready to spill with the smallest movement. He handed the clipboard back, careful to mask the unease in his fingers. She accepted it calmly. To the casual eye, nothing had passed between them, but he knew. And worse, she knew he knew. The depot buzzed with activity around them, oblivious. Forklifts beeped. A supervisor laughed at a private's clumsy attempt to load crates. Normal life. And in the middle of it, a revelation that could change everything. Lingered, his voice, when he finally spoke, was low. I think we'll need to talk about your methods of inventory management. Jordan's lips almost curved, not a smile, more like the ghost of one. I've always been good with numbers, she said. Her tone was neutral, but her words carried weight, especially when accuracy matters. Caught it, the coded reply of someone who had lived too long in shadows to ever speak plainly. He wanted to press her, but not here. Not yet. Instead, he gave a short nod and stepped back. She returned to her work, pen scratching across the sheet with unbroken rhythm, as if nothing had happened. But the magazines in her hands felt heavier now, the air thicker. Inside, Jordan's thoughts tightened into a coil. She had known this day would come. The faded stamp at the top of her clipboard wasn't an accident. It was her rebellion, her refusal to let the world bury her existence completely. Officially, Blue Phantom had died 3 years ago in a valley that reeked of smoke and blood. But she had walked out of it broken, alive. They had rebuilt her body in silence, erased her name in files, and told her she was gone. Dead to the world, alive only as a secret in a vault no one would ever open. And they had given her this life. A contractor's job, a paycheck, and instructions to fade into the quiet. But she had left her mark, one stamp, one reminder that she had not surrendered all of herself. Now someone had noticed. As the colonel walked away, Jordan's grip tightened on the clipboard. She forced her hand to relax, forced her breaths into even cadence. Outwardly, she remained the silent contractor, efficient and detached. Inwardly, her old instincts stirred. Threat assessment, options, risk levels, represented both danger and opportunity. The rest of the shift passed with the monotony of numbers and counts, but the depot no longer felt safe. Every sound sharpened, every glance from a seemed longer than usual. Dave Martinez, her supervisor, ambled past with his usual easy smile, pausing to ask if everything was fine. Jordan kept her reply professional. All routine. Colonel just needed to verify some figures. Martinez nodded, accepting the explanation without suspicion. But Jordan could feel it, the subtle ripple of curiosity left by his presence. Contractors noticed when a colonel lingered too long. They always did. By the time her shift ended, the sun had dipped low, staining the edges of the base with amber light. Jordan drove out in her aging sedan, passing familiar checkpoints. Guards waved her through with the same casual nods they had given every day for months. None of them knew what she carried inside her, not the clipboard, not the magazines, but the truth of who she was. Her apartment was as stark as her habits, bare furniture, neutral colors, clear from every angle. She cooked a simple meal, the TV droning news about conflicts in places she knew too well. Places where her bullets had once ended lives no one spoke of on camera. She sat in silence afterward, eating slowly, the colonel's face replaying in her mind. His recognition, his hesitation, his choice not to expose her immediately. Why? Loyalty to the system, curiosity, or something else, an unspoken respect for the ghost standing in front of him. The night stretched long. Jordan cleaned the single rifle she kept locked in a trunk, though she hadn't fired it in months. The routine steadied her. Piece by piece, metal and wood came apart, then slid back together, polished, whole. Her hands remembered every motion. Her mind refused to forget. She lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling. Sleep came only in fragments. Each time she closed her eyes, memories surged back, dust rising from Afghan soil, the crack of gunfire, the moment when her spotter screamed a warning just before the explosion tore everything apart. She remembered the pain, the weight of rubble, the slow fading of sound until all that remained was her heartbeat, refusing to stop. And then darkness. The world believed it had claimed her that day, but she had clawed back, rebuilt herself out of pieces, and chosen anonymity over recognition. Until today. Morning came like any other, pale light through half-open blinds. Jordan's routine didn't change, uniform on, breakfast plain, hair tied back with military neatness that betrayed her past. But every step carried new weight. The colonel knew, and that meant the past was no longer just memory. She drove to Fort Henderson with eyes sharp, scanning mirrors, checking side streets. Old habits, signs of surveillance, none obvious. Still, her gut whispered caution. When she entered the depot, Colonel was already waiting, too early for coincidence. He stood with arms folded, expression unreadable. The kind of look only career soldiers mastered, firm but not hostile, professional but layered with something unspoken. "Ms. Pike," he said, voice steady, "I hope you don't mind, but I arranged for us to talk." Jordan set her clipboard down, movements deliberate. "I have a little time before my shift." He gestured toward a small office nearby, its door half open. She walked ahead, scanning the room automatically, furniture placement, exits. The colonel noticed, though he gave no sign. Inside, the air was quieter, insulated from the warehouse hum. Closed the door gently, then sat across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. It wasn't silence. It was the weight of truths waiting to be acknowledged. Finally leaned forward. "I spent last night reviewing files, some I wasn't sure I'd ever open again. Blue Phantom's file among them." Jordan didn't react, not visibly. Her face remained neutral, her breathing calm. But inside, her mind sharpened like glass. "I don't know why you're here," continued carefully, "but I know you are, and I need to understand what that means." She studied him. His eyes weren't predatory. They were searching, not for control but for clarity, that was more dangerous in its own way. Her answer was simple, almost casual. "I count magazines, Colonel, that's all." His lips pressed into the faintest smile. He recognized the evasion and the truth behind it. "You were presumed dead," he said quietly. "I attended the briefings, I read the reports, and yet here you are, alive, hidden." Jordan's eyes flickered just for a moment. "Enough." Lowered his voice. "You don't have to tell me now, or ever, but I need to ask, if the time came, would Blue Phantom still exist?" Her fingers tapped once against the clipboard she'd brought with her, the same one with the faded stamp. She didn't answer, not directly. Instead, she said, "Sometimes accuracy matters, sometimes it doesn't." Understood. She hadn't confirmed, but she hadn't. She had left the door open. And with that, the balance shifted. The depot still hummed outside. Soldiers still moved crates, checked logs, lived in the daylight of routine. But in this small office, a buried truth had surfaced, and Jordan knew her fragile anonymity was over. The past had found her, and it was asking questions. What kind of conversation begins with a ghost in the room? What words are safe when both sides already know the truth, but neither can say it aloud? Colonel leaned back in the chair, his expression measured, but his eyes never leaving Jordan. He was a man who had spent his career learning how to read faces. His soldiers before they went into combat, his superiors when politics outweighed tactics, even his enemies across negotiating tables that always smelled faintly of smoke and distrust. And now he was studying her, the quiet contractor who wasn't supposed to matter. Jordan remained still, her hands resting lightly on her clipboard, her posture deceptively relaxed. Inside, every sense was alert. She could hear the distant clatter of crates being stacked outside, the subtle hum of fluorescent lights above, even the faint creak of the chair under its weight. All details mattered. All of it fed into the calculation of what came next. "Spoke first. You've built yourself a quiet life here." Jordan tilted her head slightly, acknowledging without confirming. "Inventory steady work." Steady echoed, safe, he let the word hang, but not fitting. She almost smiled at that, almost. "I'm good at counting." "You're good at surviving," corrected softly. Silence filled the space between them. Jordan broke it with deliberate calm. "Colonel, if you've read files, you already know what they say. You also know what they don't say, so let's not play around it. You want to know why I'm here, why I didn't stay dead. The answer's simple. I was told to disappear." Nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "And you obeyed." A flicker passed through her eyes, something close to bitterness. "I obeyed long enough." That was the truth. After the mission, after the surgeries, after the endless interrogations wrapped in medical tests, she had signed the papers. Jordan Pike, civilian contractor. Blue Phantom erased, buried, filed away. She had walked out of that facility with new ID cards, a new apartment, a job in logistics. And for 8 months she had lived like a shadow. But she had never surrendered fully. The faded code name on her clipboard was proof. A rebellion no one was supposed to notice, until did. The colonel tapped a finger lightly on the desk, a steady rhythm. "You know what this means, don't you? You being here, alive." Jordan's reply was flat. "It means trouble, for you, for me, for anyone who asks the wrong questions." His mouth twitched into something caught between a grimace and respect. "You're not wrong, but trouble isn't always the enemy." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There's a program, one I've been tasked to shape, advanced precision training. We're short on people who can teach what books don't cover." Jordan's chest tightened. She knew what he was really saying. He wasn't asking if she wanted to return to combat. He was asking if she could pass on the impossible, those calculations, those instincts, the steady hand under pressure that had earned her the name Blue Phantom. She shook her head slightly. "I'm not here to be anyone's legend. That's done." Studied her carefully, the way one studies a bridge before trusting it to hold weight. "Maybe. But legends don't vanish because someone stamps paperwork. They linger. Soldiers still whisper about you, Pike, even if they don't know your face. They talk about the shot over 2 kilometers, about the convoy that never made it to its ambush point, about the insurgent commander who thought he was untouchable until someone proved him wrong. They tell those stories because they want to believe precision still matters. His words carried weight, too much weight. Jordan exhaled slowly, her fingers tightening just enough on the clipboard that the edge pressed into her palm. "I didn't come back to be a story," she said quietly. "No," admitted, "but maybe it's time you decide what kind of story you want to leave behind." The room was still again. Jordan's mind moved in parallel tracks, assessing threat, measuring angle, searching for manipulation. But all she found was intent. Clear, unflinching. He wasn't here to exploit her, not the way intelligence officers had. He was here because he had seen potential where others had seen a ghost. Stood not abruptly but with the deliberate movement of someone ending a conversation before it soured. "Think about it," he said. He pulled a card from his pocket, sliding it across the desk. His name, his direct number, no intermediaries. "Call me if you want to discuss, no pressure, but don't pretend the choice isn't yours." Jordan looked at the card but didn't touch it. Not yet. Gave a curt nod, then left the office. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Jordan in the hum of silence. She sat there for a long moment, unmoving, the card within reach. It wasn't temptation she felt. It was something harder, the reawakening of a part of her she had buried. Outside, the depot carried on in its rhythm of crates and counts, but Jordan knew everything had shifted. She finished her shift mechanically, though her focus was fractured. Each magazine she counted became heavier. Each notation she wrote blurred with thoughts of words. Legends don't vanish. Decide what kind of story you want to leave behind. By the time she clocked out, the sun had dipped, shadows stretching long across the asphalt outside the depot. Jordan drove home in silence, her mind restless. Her apartment greeted her with the same order it always did, everything in its place. Clear, clean surfaces, but tonight it felt smaller, as if the walls had shifted inward, pressing against her. She made dinner without tasting it. Her hands moved through the motions automatically, but her mind was elsewhere, back in deserts, mountains, ruins where she had once lain prone for hours. Her world narrowed to the crosshairs and her heartbeat. She remembered the calm, the unbearable calm before pulling the trigger. Later she stood at the window, watching the night spread across the city. Lights flickered in distant buildings, cars crawled along streets. Ordinary lives. Lives she had been told to live among but never quite belonged to. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out the folded discharge papers, the ones stamped with words that still burned, killed in action. A fiction turned official, a truth erased. She traced the ink with her finger, then shoved them back into the drawer with a force that rattled the wood. Her phone lay on the counter, card beside it. She stared at both, not picking up, not dialing, not yet. Instead, she turned to the rifle case tucked in the corner. She unlocked it slowly, reverently. The rifle gleamed under the dim lamp, every part oiled, ready, even though it hadn't fired in months. She held it, feeling its weight anchor her. Old memories stirred, the smell of cordite, the distant echo of impact, the silence after. She closed her eyes, gripping it. Was she really done with this? Could she ever be? The phone buzzed suddenly, snapping her out of the spiral. A message from her supervisor. Inventory schedule adjusted tomorrow. Be early. She let out a breath, routine calling her back, the safe life, the life she had been told to keep. But as she set the rifle back in its case, she knew the truth. Routine was fragile, had cracked it open with one glance at her clipboard. And now, the choice was no longer whether to stay hidden. It was whether to step forward. She lay awake long into the night, the colonel's words echoing. Decide what kind of story you want to leave behind. For years she had lived like a ghost, but maybe ghosts weren't meant to fade. Maybe they were meant to haunt. And if she said yes, even once, Blue Phantom would live again. How do you decide between silence and resurrection? Between a life that barely breathes and one that risks breaking you all over again? Jordan Pike sat on the edge of her bed in the half-light of morning, lacing her boots with the same precision she once used to prepare her rifle. Outside, the city stirred awake, cars starting, neighbors moving, the faint chatter of a radio drifting through walls too thin to matter. Ordinary life, the kind she was supposed to blend into. But inside, her thoughts refused order. They circled back again and again to words. Legends don't vanish. Decide what kind of story you want to leave behind. She pressed her palms against her thighs, grounding herself. The scars beneath her sleeves ached faintly, like old wounds stirred by memory. She knew why. The human mind doesn't forget fire. Her last mission haunted her still. She had promised herself she wouldn't replay it, but once cracks form, the past seeps through. And now it came uninvited. Dust, heat, the smell of fuel hanging sharp in the air. She and her spotter, staff sergeant, had been on overwatch for a reconnaissance team threading through a valley in eastern Afghanistan. The mission was routine, at least on paper. Observe, confirm enemy movements, provide long-range support if needed. They had set up high on a ridge, their world narrowed to scopes and radios. Hours passed, sun bleeding into the rocks. Then movement, shadows slipping where no patrol should have been. Dozens, more than the intel had suggested. Too many. Her finger rested on the trigger, her body sinking into that familiar stillness. Heartbeat slow, breath steady. First shot cracked across the valley, clean and precise. A man dropped, then another. Radio chatter spiked, orders scrambled, tension coiled into chaos. And then the explosion. She remembered the sound first, a roar that ripped through the air, tearing rock and dirt upward in a storm. She hadn't even seen the mortar before it hit. 1 second was beside her, the next there was nothing but smoke, fire, shrapnel. Her body slammed against the ridge, lungs crushed by impact. Ears ringing, vision blurred, she felt weight pinning her down. Not debris, her own broken bones refusing to obey. Voices crackled on the radio, screaming orders, then silence. She clawed for breath, each inhale a knife. She tried to reach her rifle, but her arm wouldn't respond. Darkness crept in at the edges, swallowing sound, swallowing everything. The last thing she remembered was the beat of her heart, refusing to stop even when everything else did. When she woke, she was in a hospital bed, tubes, machines, the steady beep of monitors keeping time with her fractured pulse. She learned later that had been out half dead himself. The rest of the mission had ended in chaos. She had been listed among the missing, then presumed KIA. The brass had made their choice. Let Blue Phantom stay dead. Jordan dragged herself out of the memory with a sharp breath, her hands trembling slightly. She forced them still. She had survived that valley, but part of her had remained buried there in the rubble and the silence. Now was asking her to dig it up. The depot didn't make it easier. That morning, every face she passed seemed sharper, every sound louder. Forklifts groaned, soldiers bantered, but underneath it all she felt eyes. Not suspicion. Not yet. Just the echo of her own awareness, heightened by the knowledge that her secret wasn't entirely hers anymore. Dave Martinez stopped by her station, cheerful as always. Early again, Pike. You trying to make the rest of us look bad? Jordan managed a thin smile, just keeping things organized. Well, it's appreciated, he said, patting the clipboard she held. No one runs a count than you, he ambled off, oblivious. But the weight of his casual praise pressed on her. No one runs a count. If he only knew, her entire life had become counting. Magazines, hours, days, hiding behind precision so she didn't have to feel the absence of purpose. By midday, she found herself drifting. She picked up a magazine, turned it in her hand, stared at the serial number, but her mind was elsewhere. His card burned in her pocket like a live coal. When the lunch bell rang, she didn't eat. She walked outside instead, finding a quiet corner behind the depot where sunlight broke across the gravel. She pulled the card out, running her thumb over the embossed letters. Colonel, direct line. She could call. She could step back into something that mattered, but the thought of it sent a chill through her. Because saying yes wasn't just about training others. It was about stepping into the shadow of who she had been. And what if she wasn't that person anymore? She had scars no one saw, not just the ones stitched into her skin, but the fractures in her mind. Nights where she woke gasping, ears ringing with echoes of explosions. Mornings where she sat frozen, staring at her own reflection, unable to reconcile the face she saw with the one stamped KIA in military files. What if she taught them wrong? What if she passed down hesitation instead of precision, fear instead of calm? The world thought Blue Phantom had been unstoppable, but Jordan Pike knew the truth. Blue Phantom had bled. Blue Phantom had nearly died under rubble, powerless, afraid. And yet, something in its words had lit a spark. Decide what kind of story you want to leave behind. That evening, Jordan returned to her apartment and sat at her desk, rifle case open in front of her. She began cleaning it again, though it didn't need it. Piece by piece, she disassembled, wiped, reassembled. The motions calmed her. They always had. But as her hands worked, her mind spun. She remembered the faces of those she had once trained unofficially, spotters, younger snipers, soldiers who had begged for tips in the downtime between missions. She remembered how their eyes lit up when a technique clicked, when a shot landed truer than they'd ever managed before. That had mattered, almost as much as the missions themselves. Maybe more. She leaned back, rifle balanced across her lap. The city lights flickered outside her window. She imagined what it would mean to stand in front of a group again, not as Blue Phantom, not as a ghost, but as an instructor. Someone who gave others the tools to survive where she nearly hadn't. The thought frightened her, but it also filled her with something she hadn't felt in months: purpose. The next day at the depot, she caught watching her from across the warehouse floor. He didn't approach. He didn't need to. His look was enough. By the time her shift ended, Jordan's decision was still unresolved. But that night, she sat with her phone in hand, his number dialed. She didn't press call, not yet. Instead, she whispered to herself in the empty apartment, "Not tonight." But she knew the truth. Silence was no longer enough. The question wasn't whether she would answer, it was when. Because ghosts can only haunt for so long before they need to be seen. Why would a colonel arrive at the depot before dawn? Why wait by a workstation that wasn't supposed to matter? Jordan spotted him the moment she walked in, leaned casually against a stack of crates, a folder under his arm, his posture patient but unyielding. Soldiers passed without noticing. To them, he was just another officer on rounds. To Jordan, he was inevitability in uniform. She kept her steps steady, her expression neutral. Clipboard in hand, lunch bag tucked under her arm, every movement disciplined into normalcy. But her pulse betrayed her. "Ms. Pike," greeted, voice formal. "Colonel." I took the liberty of arranging that conversation we discussed. Jordan set her bag down slowly, every gesture deliberate. "I have a little time before my shift." Nodded toward an office tucked off the depot floor. Semi-private, not interrogation, not entirely casual either. A middle ground, neutral ground. Inside, Jordan scanned the space instinctively, doors, windows, furniture. She noted everything because that's what she did. Closed the door softly, took a seat opposite her. His movements were careful, like a man diffusing a mine. He slid the folder across the desk. "I've reviewed records, the classified ones." Jordan didn't touch it. She didn't need to. She already knew what those files said. The kill counts, the mission reports, the heavily redacted paragraphs that hid things she remembered vividly. His gaze was steady. "I want you to understand something. I'm not here to expose you. I'm not here to drag you into hearings or force you back into operations. That decision, keeping you dead, was made far above me. I'm not undoing it." Jordan held his eyes, waiting. "What I am saying," continued, "is that your skills shouldn't rot in a warehouse. We're standing up a new advanced marksmanship program here at Fort Henderson. We need someone who knows the reality, not just the manuals. You'd be perfect." The word lodged like grit in her chest. Perfect. People had used that word before. Perfect shot, perfect timing, perfect ghost. None of it had saved her from rubble and fire. Jordan leaned back slightly. "You're asking me to step halfway into a world I was told to leave. That comes with consequences, for me, for you." Nodded unfazed. "I know the risks, which is why I'm offering this under contractor cover. You wouldn't be Blue Phantom. You'd be Instructor Pike, teaching marksmanship, not leading missions. Officially, it's training support. Unofficially, it's the kind of preparation that keeps soldiers alive." Jordan let silence stretch. Didn't feel it, he knew better. "Finally," she said, "and what happens when someone recognizes more than my grip on a clipboard?" His eyes softened just slightly. "Then we handle it quietly together." The simplicity of the answer unsettled her. No protocol, no bureaucracy, just trust, something rare in her world. She didn't commit, not yet, but she didn't say no either. The following days blurred into a rhythm of counts and decisions left unspoken. Jordan moved through the depot like always, but inside she was shifting. Every sound, every interaction was weighed against offer. At lunch one day, a young lieutenant stopped by her station, fresh-faced, polite but clumsy. He fumbled his inventory sheet, struggling to match magazines to serial numbers. Jordan guided him quietly, pointing out the mistakes without judgment. The relief on his face was almost childlike. "Thanks, ma'am. Don't know what I'd do without help." She nodded, but inside she felt something stir. A flicker of what teaching might feel like. Purpose, disguised in the ordinary. That night she dreamed of again. His voice shouting over the radio. The silence that followed. She woke before dawn, hands clenched, sheets twisted. The phone sat on her nightstand, his card beside it. She stared for a long time, then dialed. He answered on the second ring. "This is Pike." Her voice was steady, too steady. "I'll hear the details." A pause, then, "Good, meet me tomorrow, 700. I'll show you the facility." The next morning, Jordan followed him to a section of Fort Henderson she had never seen. Remote, secure. A shooting range stretched into the distance, targets at varying distances, some so far they blurred into the horizon. Indoor ranges lined with advanced ballistics tech. Classrooms equipped with simulation systems. It wasn't just a facility, it was a promise. Walked her through every section, his tone pragmatic. "We're building a program for the next generation of special operators. Fundamentals, yes, but also advanced tactics, environmental adjustments, long-range problem-solving, stress conditioning. Things only experience can teach." Jordan's hand brushed the edge of a shooting bench as he spoke. The surface felt both foreign and familiar. Memories pressed against her like ghosts leaning in close. "This would be your office," gestured to a small room overlooking the outdoor range. Simple, functional, a desk. A window with a view she knew too well, the long stretch where bullets met air, where precision became survival. Jordan stayed silent. She traced the window frame with her eyes, remembering the view from mountain ridges, ruined rooftops, desert plateaus. Always the same horizon. Always the same silence before the shot. Didn't rush her, he let her absorb it. When he finally spoke, it was quiet. "I'm not asking you to go back. I'm asking you to pass forward what you know, that's all." Jordan exhaled slowly. The weight in her chest eased just a fraction. "If I say yes, I set terms." Inclined his head. "Name them." "No combat, no reactivation, I stay Pike. The file stays closed." "Agreed." "No pressure to perform miracles. I train them, but they walk their own path." Lips quirked. "You've never believed in miracles anyway, just math." Despite herself, Jordan almost smiled. She looked out the window again, the outdoor range stretching endless and unforgiving. She thought of the young lieutenant fumbling his inventory, of voice fading into static, of the years she had spent counting magazines to stay hidden. Finally she turned back to, "I'll do it, but not for you, not for the system, for them." His nod was small, but it carried the weight of victory, not for himself, but for the soldiers who would stand in front of her. Jordan left the facility that day with her decision anchored, but not at peace. She knew the risks. She knew the ghost she would stir by teaching others the skills she had once wielded in silence. But she also knew something else. Counting magazines had never been living. It had only been surviving. And maybe it was time to do more than survive. That night she called line again, her voice steady, deliberate. "I accept the position." She hung up before he could reply. Then she sat in her quiet apartment, staring at her rifle case. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a ghost pressing against the edges of the world. She felt like someone about to step into the light. How do you stand in front of others when your very existence is supposed to be a secret? How do you teach without revealing the cost of the lessons? Jordan Pike stood in the doorway of the new classroom, her contractor uniform pressed, her boots clean but worn at the edges. 12 faces looked back at her, soldiers pulled from different branches, different backgrounds, but all wearing the same expression. A mix of curiosity, skepticism, and the quiet arrogance of the young. They didn't know her name beyond the introduction had given them. Instructor Pike, civilian contractor, extensive experience in marksmanship. That was it. No record, no rank, no history, just a title. Jordan held their gaze without flinching. "I'm not here to tell you stories," she said. Her voice was calm, even. "I'm here to make sure you hit what you aim at, and if you don't, you'll learn why." The room shifted. Some leaned forward, some smirked, testing her authority. Jordan recognized it instantly. Young operators always probed, searching for weakness. She didn't give them any. The first session was simple, fundamentals. Stance, breathing, trigger discipline. Things they already knew. Things they thought they had mastered. Jordan walked the line behind them as they practiced on the range, her eyes sharp, her corrections brief and precise. "Your shoulders are too tense. Reset your grip. You're holding your breath too long. Let it flow." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Authority carried differently when it came from someone who knew. By mid-morning, the first shot rang out across the range. Then another. The air filled with the rhythm of gunfire, brass casings clattering to the ground. Jordan listened not just to the shots but to the silences between them. She could hear mistakes before she saw them. Too much hesitation, too quick on the trigger, overconfidence. She stopped behind one soldier, a tall sergeant who had grouped his shots poorly. His frustration was written across his clenched jaw. "Step back," Jordan said. He turned, surprised. "Step back, watch." She took his position, adjusted the rifle without flourish, and fired 3 times in measured rhythm. The shots landed so tight they nearly touched. She set the rifle down, turned, and handed it back to him. "Now you try," she said simply. The smirks faded, the skepticism shifted. By the end of the day, her students weren't looking at her like a civilian contractor. They were looking at her like someone who could teach them something real. But Jordan's mind was not calm. Each correction she gave, each demonstration she performed, pulled at threads she had tried to leave knotted. She could feel the old instincts waking, the awareness of wind direction without needing to check a gauge, the subconscious measurement of distance just by glancing, the steady cadence of breath aligning with the squeeze of a trigger. Blue Phantom wasn't gone. She was just quieter now, living in the way Jordan moved, spoke, and taught. That night back in her apartment, Jordan sat in silence. Her body was tired, but her mind restless. She thought of their faces, eager, untested, some arrogant, some afraid. She saw herself in them. The young sniper who had once thought skill alone would be enough. Before she had learned that survival required more than precision. It required endurance, discipline, the ability to live with the silence after the shot. She closed her eyes, remembering his laughter during training sessions, the way he had carried her pack without asking on long marches, his voice breaking over the radio in their last mission. She wondered where he was now, if he thought of her at all, if he still carried guilt for leaving her behind. Jordan pushed the thought away and opened her rifle case. Cleaning it was easier than remembering. Piece by piece, she polished steel, her hands steady, her heart less so. The second day, she introduced stress drills, firing under timed conditions after physical exertion. Most faltered. That was the point. She let them feel the edge of failure, then guided them back. One soldier, a young lieutenant, froze during a timed drill. His shots scattered wide, panic rising in his posture. Jordan called him aside. "You're thinking too much," she told him. He shook his head, shame burning in his eyes. "I know the fundamentals, I just—" "You're letting doubt win," Jordan interrupted. Her tone was calm, but her words sharp. "Doubt's normal, fear's normal, but you don't let it touch your trigger finger. You don't let it decide for you." He swallowed hard. "How do you stop it?" Jordan hesitated. The answer she wanted to give was the one she couldn't. You don't stop it, you carry it with you. You let it sharpen you. And sometimes you fail anyway. Instead, she said, you trust your training, you breathe. And you remember that the shot doesn't care how you feel. It only cares how steady you are. The lieutenant nodded, his shoulders easing slightly. He returned to the line, steadier this time. His shots landed closer, not perfect, but better. Jordan turned away, her jaw tight. Teaching them meant reliving it. Reliving meant remembering. At lunch, stopped by the range. He watched from a distance, arms folded, expression unreadable. When the session ended, he approached Jordan quietly. "They're listening," he said. Jordan gave a short nod. "They're learning." "And you?" asked. She met his gaze. "I'm remembering." Studied her for a moment, then said softly, "That's not always a curse." Jordan didn't reply, but inside she wasn't sure if he was right. By the end of the week, the atmosphere in the classroom had shifted. The students no longer tested her. They followed her words with the focus of those who understood they were being handed something valuable. Jordan saw it in their posture, in the way they adjusted without argument, in the quiet respect growing in their eyes. She had earned them, not through rank, not through stories, through precision. But respect came with weight. Each of their faces pressed against her thoughts at night. Each of their failures felt sharper than her own. Teaching wasn't easier than surviving. It was heavier. Because now, when they faltered, she wasn't thinking about points on a target. She was thinking about valleys filled with dust and fire, about the silence after his voice cut out, about what failure cost when bullets weren't just training rounds. She sat awake one night, the city lights flickering outside her window, the rifle case open beside her. She thought of his words again. Legends don't vanish. Decide what kind of story you want to leave behind. For years, her story had been survival. Now it was being written in the hands of 12 students who looked at her like she held answers. Jordan wasn't sure if she did, but she knew one thing: she would give them everything she had left. Not because the system asked it, not because expected it, but because she couldn't let them carry the same ghost she did. And in that decision, something shifted. For the first time in years, Jordan Pike didn't feel like a ghost haunting her own life. She felt like someone alive, broken, unfinished, but alive. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. What happens when the whispers begin? When respect turns into curiosity, and curiosity begins to edge too close to the truth. Jordan Pike stood at the far end of the range, arms folded, watching as her students cycled through a long-distance drill. Wind gusted across the open field, tugging at flags and scattering dust. Targets stood almost invisible at the horizon, small squares waiting to test patience as much as skill. One by one, her students fired. One by one, they adjusted. The first week, they had struggled with the fundamentals under pressure. Now their rounds struck cleaner, not perfect, but good. Good enough to matter when distance meant life. Jordan tracked every shot. She knew their weaknesses already, but she let them discover their own corrections. That was the difference between a shooter and a sniper. Anyone could be corrected. Only the prepared could self-correct. When the drill ended, she called them in. Sweat streaked their faces. Their breaths were heavy, but their eyes burned with something she recognized: determination. The same look she once wore, lying in the dirt with her scope aimed across valleys no map could capture. "You're improving," Jordan said evenly. "But don't confuse progress with mastery. A target doesn't care if you're close. Either you hit or you don't. Out there, close means someone else doesn't come home." They nodded, some swallowed hard, they understood. From the observation platform, clapped his hands once sharp. "Listen to her, she's right. What you're learning here will save lives if you take it seriously. Don't waste it." The students dispersed, murmuring among themselves, descended from the platform, joining Jordan at her side. "They respect you," he said quietly. Jordan's gaze stayed on the horizon. Respect fades when questions start. Studied her, his brow furrowed. "Are they asking?" "Not directly," she exhaled slowly, "but they're watching too closely." Said nothing. He didn't need to. They both knew the risk. Legends carried weight and rumors. Soldiers had long memories and stories traveled faster than bullets. Later that afternoon, during a classroom session, one of the sergeants raised a hand. "Ma'am, permission to ask something off the books." Jordan's body stilled. She had known this moment would come. "Depends on the question," she said evenly. The sergeant hesitated, eyes flicking around the room. Then he asked, "Where did you learn to shoot like this? Manuals don't cover half of what you're teaching." The room fell silent. 12 pairs of eyes locked on her. Jordan let the silence stretch. Too long would be suspicious. Too short would be careless. Finally, she said, "Experience, years of it, the kind that doesn't go in manuals." The sergeant nodded slowly, but the question lingered in the air like smoke. Jordan saw it in their faces. They weren't satisfied. That night she sat in her apartment, staring at the phone, the urge to call Claude at her, to demand he pull her out before the whispers became dangerous. But she didn't dial. Instead, she opened her rifle case and stared at the weapon inside. Her reflection caught faintly in the steel. She whispered, "They'll find out." The rifle, as always, gave no answer. Days passed. The training grew harder. Jordan pushed them further: longer hours, harsher drills, higher standards. The students responded. Their shots grew steadier, their minds sharper. She saw it in their posture, in their confidence. They were becoming more than shooters. They were becoming something closer to ready. But the whispers didn't fade. They deepened. She caught fragments in the hallways, over lunch, in the locker rooms when they thought she was out of earshot. "She's too good to be just a contractor. Ever seen anyone move like that? Rumor says she used to be in Black Ops." One night, as she locked up the range, she noticed a soldier lingering near the door. The young lieutenant who had struggled with doubt early on. "Something on your mind, Lieutenant?" she asked. He hesitated, then stepped closer. His expression was cautious, respectful, but edged with determination. "Ma'am, I've seen your name before, Pike, on an old after-action report from Kandahar. It was redacted, but there was a blue phantom. Is that you?" Jordan's chest tightened. The words struck harder than any bullet. She didn't flinch outwardly. Years of discipline wrapped her face in stone, but inside she was unraveling. "Careful, Lieutenant," she said softly. "Curiosity can be dangerous." His eyes widened. He opened his mouth, then shut it. Finally, he nodded. "Understood." He turned and walked away. Jordan stood frozen in the empty hallway, long after he was gone. The next morning found her already at the range, staring down the line of targets. He didn't ask why she was early. He knew. Someone asked, didn't they? Jordan's jaw tightened. "They're close." Exhaled slow. I'll manage the fallout if it comes. But Jordan shook her head. No, I will. Watched her carefully. You sure? She nodded once. If they find out, it'll come from me, not from rumors, not from you. The day's training passed, but Jordan felt every glance sharper than usual. The lieutenant avoided her eyes. The others whispered less openly. Tension hummed beneath the surface. That night Jordan sat at her window again, the city lights blurred against the glass. She thought of the valley. She thought of the silence after the explosion. And she thought of her students, young, untested, looking to her for guidance they didn't understand came from ghosts. Her past was no longer safe. The she had buried was clawing its way back into the light. She whispered to herself, almost like a confession, maybe it's time. Because sometimes survival isn't about staying hidden. Sometimes it's about being seen on your own terms. And when Blue Phantom rose again, it wouldn't be as a ghost. It would be as a teacher. What happens when silence breaks? When the lie you've carried so long weighs more than the truth itself? Jordan Pike knew it was coming the moment she stepped into the classroom. The air felt different, heavier, tense. Her students sat than usual, eyes fixed not on their notes but on her. The lieutenant who had whispered Blue Phantom's name into the hallway days earlier sat near the front, his jaw clenched, his gaze unwavering. Wasn't there, he had left her to teach as always. Maybe he trusted her to handle it. Maybe he knew she had to. Jordan set her binder on the desk, its pages filled with drills, diagrams, ballistic charts. She didn't open it. Instead, she stood silently, scanning each face. 12 soldiers, 12 sets of questions she could feel burning through the air. Finally, the sergeant who had once smirked at her during their first day spoke. "Ma'am, we need to know. Who are you really?" The words dropped heavy, echoing louder than the gunfire ever had. Jordan's throat tightened. She could deny it, brush it off, walk out and never return, would cover her if she asked. The system would bury her again. But looking into their faces, young, determined, desperate for truth, she knew denial would be a different kind of death. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself the way she always had before a shot, and then she spoke. "My name is Jordan Pike," she said quietly, "but once in another life they called me Blue Phantom." The room stilled. No one moved, no one breathed. She continued, her voice even but edged with something raw. "You've heard stories. Maybe you thought they were myths. They were. I was there. The distances, the shots, the missions no one wrote down. I was part of all of it, until the day until the day they wrote me off as dead." Shock rippled through the room. Some leaned forward, hungry for more. Others looked away, uncomfortable. The lieutenant's eyes glistened with something like vindication. Jordan didn't let the silence grow. She stepped closer, her gaze sweeping them all. "You want to know what it meant? It meant lying in the dirt for hours, sometimes days, waiting for a moment you weren't even sure would come. It meant pulling a trigger that changed lives you'd never meet. It meant silence afterward, silence so heavy you wondered if you'd ever hear your own heart again." Her voice cracked just barely. She let it. "You want the truth? Blue Phantom didn't die in a firefight. She died in a hospital bed, hooked to machines, while command stamped killed in action across her file. They buried her because it was easier than remembering her. I walked out alive but erased. And for years I let them erase me." The soldiers shifted in their seats, their faces solemn now, respect mixed with something deeper. Jordan pressed on. "I came here because I thought I could live small, count magazines, disappear. But then Colonel saw the truth written in the margins, and now you see it too." She paused, her voice lowering. "So listen carefully. I'm not telling you this for glory. Glory is a lie, or a lie. What matters is what you do when the silence comes. What matters is whether you can live with the choices you make when your finger touches the trigger." The young lieutenant's hand trembled slightly as he raised it. "Ma'am, why tell us now?" Jordan's eyes softened, though her jaw remained tight. "Because secrets rot, And because if you're going to carry forward what I teach you, you deserve to know the weight of it. I can give you skills. I can't give you peace. That part you'll have to find yourself." No one spoke after that. The room was filled not with questions, but with quiet reverence. Jordan turned, walked to the whiteboard, and wrote in clean letters, "Precision is survival. Discipline is life. Silence is the cost." She set the marker down. That's all Blue Phantom ever was, not a legend, not a ghost, just a soldier who learned too well what silence costs. If you remember nothing else from me, remember that. The lesson that day was different. They drilled, but with sharper focus. Every correction she gave landed deeper. They weren't just listening to an instructor anymore. They were listening to someone who had carried the myth they had whispered about and survived it. When the session ended, no one rushed out. They lingered, packing gear slowly, eyes glancing back at her as though afraid she might vanish again. The lieutenant lingered last. He stopped by her desk, voice quiet. "Thank you for trusting us." Jordan gave him a small nod. "Don't thank me, just don't waste it." When he left, the room was finally empty. Jordan sat heavily in the chair, her body shaking now that it was over. She pressed her hands to her face, breathing hard. She hadn't planned to tell them, not like that, but maybe it was the only way. That evening found her in her office overlooking the range. He leaned against the doorframe, his expression unreadable. "So," he said, "you told them." Jordan didn't look up. "They already knew, I just confirmed it." "Risky move." She exhaled. "Necessary move." Studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "They'll follow you now, more than before, be careful with that." Jordan finally met his gaze. "I don't want followers, I want survivors." His lips quirked into something between pride and sorrow. "Then you're the right one for this." When he left, Jordan stood by the window, staring at the empty range under the fading light. She felt both lighter and heavier at once. The secret was no longer hers alone, but secrets, once spoken, carried their own weight. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was pretending to be someone else. She wasn't just the woman with the clipboard. She wasn't just the erased file stamped KIA. She was both, Jordan Pike and Blue Phantom, and maybe finally that was enough. But deep down, she knew the storm wasn't over. Because once a name like Blue Phantom surfaces, it doesn't sink quietly. And someone, somewhere would notice. What happens when the system realizes its ghost has been walking among the living? It started small. A phone call didn't answer in front of her. A file folder left too long on his desk. Soldiers lingering outside her classroom, hushed after hearing her name spoken in tones too sharp to be casual. Jordan Pike felt it long before told her outright. The net was closing. Not from her students, who now looked at her with something closer to reverence than suspicion, but from the machinery of the institution she had once bled for. On a rainy Thursday, walked into her office, his face carved from stone. "We've got a problem," he said simply. Jordan closed the binder she had been marking. "How bad?" "Bad enough." He set a folder on her desk. Inside, she saw her own face, younger, harder, printed above the she thought she'd buried forever. Blue Phantom, status, KIA. The irony stung. "Guess I'm not as dead as they'd like." His jaw tightened. Washington's asking questions. Someone heard whispers. Someone pulled a string. Now your name is in the wrong rooms. Jordan leaned back, exhaling slowly. "So what happens now? They drag me back into a hearing room, lock me up for lying about being alive." "No," said, his voice carried steel. "Not while I have a say." Jordan studied him, searching for any crack in his resolve. She found none. "That could cost you." His eyes didn't waver. "So be it." The knock came that afternoon. Two men in suits, their posture too rigid to be civilians. Intelligence, clean-cut, polite on the surface, sharp underneath. "Instructor Pike," one asked, voice measured. "Contractor Pike," corrected from her side. You're in my facility. You'll respect the titles we use here." The agent gave a thin smile. "Of course, Colonel, we're just here for clarification. A name's been circulating. A blue phantom." Jordan stood silent, her hands steady at her sides. Her heart beat slow, controlled. The second agent's gaze lingered on her. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Spoke before she could. Urban legends run wild in training environments. Soldiers embellish stories, turn instructors into myths. It happens. The first agent tilted his head. "Still, we'd like to ask Ms. Pike a few questions, privately." Stepped forward, his voice calm but edged with authority. "If you want my instructors, you go through me. And if you think I'll let you tear apart a program that's already saving lives because of ghost stories, you'll need more than whispers." The air in the room tightened. For a moment, Jordan thought the agents would push harder, but finally the first one closed his folder, offering a polite nod. "Understood. We'll be in touch." They left as quietly as they came, but the message was clear. The system knew. When the door shut, Jordan exhaled slowly. "You just painted a target on yourself." His expression softened, though only slightly. "Better me than you." That night Jordan couldn't sleep. She walked the length of her apartment, her scars itching with memory. The valley, the explosion, the silence afterward. She thought of the students, of their wide eyes when she had confessed the truth, of their steady hands now, striking targets they once missed. She realized something in that quiet storm of thought. It wasn't about whether the system claimed her again. It wasn't about whether the world whispered Blue Phantom's name. It was about what she had already given. The next day she returned to the range. The students lined up as always, rifles ready, faces expectant. The whispers of intelligence officers didn't reach them here. Here, it was just steel, distance, and breath. Jordan walked the line, correcting grips, adjusting stances, her voice calm. She watched them fire, watched them improve, watched them carry forward the lessons carved into her scars. Halfway through the session, she stopped, standing before them. For once, she didn't give a drill. She gave words. "Listen to me," she said. Her voice carried not command, but something deeper. "Out there you'll hear stories, names, legends. Don't chase them, don't believe them. Legends don't save you. Fundamentals do. Breathing does. Patience does. Each of you is here not to become a ghost, but to become someone who survives when others don't." They stood silent, absorbing every word. She continued, softer now. "I'm not asking you to remember me. I'm asking you to remember what I taught you. Precision, discipline, silence. Carry that, that's enough." The lieutenant, the one who had first spoken her aloud, met her eyes. He gave a small nod, steady and sure. When the session ended, Jordan lingered alone on the range. The target stretched out into the horizon, distant but reachable. She thought of every soldier she had once watched through a scope, whose lives balanced on the weight of her finger. For years she had been a ghost. For months she had been a shadow with a clipboard. Now she was something else entirely. Not a legend, not a myth, just a soldier who had chosen to keep teaching, even when silence would have been easier. That night she sat at her window again, city lights flickering like distant tracer fire. The phone was quiet, hadn't called. The intelligence men hadn't returned. The storm might come tomorrow, or it might never come. But Jordan knew one thing with certainty. Even if the system buried her again, her lessons would outlive her. They already had. She whispered into the dark, a truth she had carried too long. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And for Jordan Pike, that was enough.